My name is Evelyn Hart, and for most of my adult life, I have sat above the noise, listening carefully as people try to bend truth into something more convenient. Years in the courtroom teach you many things. You learn how deception sounds when it is dressed in confidence. You learn how guilt hides behind charm, and eventually, you learn how to stay still while the world performs around you. But none of that quite prepares you for the quiet kind of cruelty that comes from someone who knows you too well. The engagement party was extravagant in the way people intend it to be seen. Soft golden lighting poured from chandeliers overhead, reflecting off polished glass and silver trays carried by waitstaff who moved like shadows. A quartet played something classical in the corner, just loud enough to suggest elegance, not enough to interrupt conversation. My younger sister Lila stood at the center of it all. She had always known how to hold attention without asking for it, or at least without appearing to. Her fiancé's family surrounded her like a carefully arranged portrait. Perfect smiles, perfect posture, the kind of people who look like they have never been told no. And then there was me. I arrived on time, dressed simply in a black dress, tailored with the same precision I preferred in court. No embellishments, no distractions, just clean lines and intention. As I stepped inside, I caught Leela's gaze almost immediately. She looked directly at me, her expression unreadable for a fraction of a second. Then her head tilted slightly, and she smiled. It was not a welcoming smile. It was the kind that quietly asks why you are there at all. She leaned toward the group beside her, whispered something behind her hand, and within seconds, a few pairs of eyes drifted in my direction, curious, lightly amused, already forming conclusions. I did not react. I had seen worse under oath, but standing there, surrounded by soft light and polished strangers, I was reminded of something I had learned long ago. The deepest cuts rarely come from enemies. They come from the people who understand exactly where to aim. People tend to misunderstand silence. They mistake it for weakness, for hesitation, for a lack of substance. What they do not realize is that sometimes silence is a decision, a strategy, a way of surviving environments where speaking only makes things worse. Growing up with Lila meant learning that early. She was always the center of things, effortlessly social, endlessly charming, able to talk her way out of almost anything. Our parents adored her in that quiet, unquestioning way that leaves little room for anyone else. They would say she just has a natural way with people, usually after she had smoothed over some mistake with a laugh and a well-timed apology. I, on the other hand, was the serious one, the one who preferred books to conversations, the one who asked questions that made people uncomfortable. By the time we were teenagers, Lila had already decided who I was in her story. I was the dull one, the rigid one, the sister who did not know how to have fun. She hosted gatherings I was never invited to, told people exaggerated versions of who I was, turned me into a quiet punchline that others repeated without thinking. At home, it was not much different. If she teased me at the dinner table, our parents laughed. If I corrected something or pushed back, I was told not to be so intense. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked who I was becoming, so I stopped offering. I focused on what I could control. School, discipline, precision. I learned how to build arguments that did not need volume to be effective. I learned how to observe before speaking, how to dismantle ideas without raising my voice, while Leela drifted through college, chasing attention and half-finished ambitions. I moved forward with intention. Law school came next, then long nights, internships, clerkships, years of work that no one applauded because no one was watching. When I was accepted into a federal clerkship, I sent a message home and received no response. By then, I was not surprised. Distance had become something else entirely. Not rejection, not even disappointment, just quiet. Over time, my work began to speak for me. Cases built on cases, decisions that carried weight. A reputation formed not through noise, but through consistency. At 39, I was appointed to the bench. There was a small article in a regional paper, a photograph taken outside the courthouse, my robe folded neatly over one arm. I mailed a copy to my parents, and nothing came back. And strangely, that did not hurt the way it once would have. I had built a life that did not depend on their acknowledgement. In the courtroom, people listened. When I spoke, my words mattered. My decisions had consequences. And that was enough. I saw Lila only occasionally after that. Holidays mostly. The kind where everyone pretends time has not changed anything. She always arrived, dressed to be noticed, with stories that sounded more impressive than they were. I would sit quietly watching the performance, wondering how someone could say so much without ever revealing anything real. We had not spoken in over a year when the invitation arrived. It was elaborate, thick paper, gold lettering, a faint floral scent that lingered longer than necessary. Celebrate the engagement of Lila Hart and Daniel Reeves. There was no personal note, just a separate message later that day telling me I could come if I wanted. No pressure, and reminding me not to be too formal, because his family was particular. I read that line more than once and let it sit, not because it offended me, but because it confirmed something simple. She still saw me as a version of myself that no longer existed, or maybe never truly had. She did not know what I had become, how many courtrooms I had stood in, how many decisions I had made that shaped lives in ways she could not imagine, but she had never asked. None of them had. So I decided to go, not for her, not even for closure, but because there comes a point where silence stops being protection and starts becoming permission. And I was no longer interested in granting that. The venue sat on a hill, overlooking the city, all glass walls and perfectly trimmed greenery, the kind of place designed less for comfort and more for impression. Lila's name appeared on a polished sign near the entrance, her fiancé's just beneath it, slightly smaller, though still carefully styled, and that alone told me enough. I arrived a few minutes early, as I always do, and sat in the car for a moment, watching guests step out in coordinated elegance, adjusting sleeves, checking reflections in windows, preparing to be seen. Then I stepped inside. No one announced my arrival. There was no shift in the room, just a polite greeting from a hostess, who handed me a glass and moved on without a second glance. And it suited me. Inside, the energy was exactly what I expected. Controlled laughter, polished conversations, groups forming and dissolving like rehearsed movements. Lila stood at the center of it all, and I stayed near the edges, observing, listening. My parents were there too. My mother looked radiant in a way that felt slightly forced, wearing jewelry I had once sent her, still never acknowledged. My father stood beside her, present in body, distant in everything else. She saw me, paused, smiled politely like she was trying to place me, then turned away. I took a seat near the back, partially shielded by an oversized arrangement of white flowers. It was easier that way. They did not want to see me, and I had no interest in being seen through their version of me. Eventually, Lila approached, glowing in the way people blow when they believe they are being watched. "Well," she said lightly, "you actually came." "I had the time," I replied. Her eyes moved over my dress. Subtle but deliberate. "Black," she noted. "Interesting choice. I prefer simple things," I said. She smiled, though it did not quite settle. "Just try not to make things uncomfortable," she added quietly. "Daniel's family can be particular." "Then they should ask better questions," I said. She let out a quick laugh, louder than necessary, already stepping away as if to dissolve the moment before it lingered. Some things never change. Dinner came and went in soft waves of conversation. Speeches followed, filled with stories polished just enough to sound spontaneous. Lila laughed in all the right places, absorbing attention as easily as breathing. I remained where I was, unnoticed, unasked. At one point, I overheard Daniel speaking with someone nearby. "She has a sister," he said casually, "but they are not really close." I did not react. That version of me had always been easier for them. Eventually, Lila stood to speak. She thanked everyone, smiled, paused in all the right places. Then, as expected, she mentioned me. "My sister Evelyn is here tonight," she said, her tone playful. "She's always been a bit intense." Light laughter followed. "She works in government or something like that. Paperwork. Very important, I'm sure." More laughter. I let the silence stretch before responding. "I am not in administration," I said calmly. The room shifted just slightly. Daniel looked at me, curiosity replacing amusement. "Then what do you do?" he asked. I met his gaze. "I am a judge." The words did not land loudly, but they landed. The change was immediate, subtle but undeniable. Conversations paused, expressions shifted. A few people exchanged glances, recalibrating. Someone nearby recognized my name. Another confirmed it. Phones appeared quietly beneath the table. Lila's expression faltered for the first time that evening. "I did not realize you were still doing that," she said, attempting to recover. I did not respond to that. Instead, I stood, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough. When people do not ask, I said evenly, they should not assume. No anger, no emphasis, just clarity. I placed my napkin down and stepped away from the table. No one stopped me. No one knew how outside the air felt different, cleaner, honest in a way the room behind me had not been. My phone buzzed before I reached the car. A call, then another. Messages followed. Questions, accusations, confusion. I ignored them. They had never asked who I was when it mattered. They had only created a version that made them comfortable. And when the truth replaced it, they did not feel remorse. They felt exposed. I was not angry. That had passed a long time ago. What remained was something quieter, something steadier, understanding. I had built a life without their recognition, without their approval. Every step earned, every decision mine. They had not failed to see me because I was hidden. They failed because they never looked. And now, whether they admitted it or not, they would not, because I demanded it, but because truth has a way of making itself known. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. No applause, no farewell, just silence. The kind that no longer weighs on you, the kind that finally feels like your own.